Title. My wife joked, "Marrying you was a mistake." The room fell silent when I replied, "I couldn't agree more." When my wife Emily joked, "Marrying you was a mistake," the entire room burst into awkward laughter, everyone except me. It wasn't the first time she had said something like that, but this time, it hit differently. Maybe it was the way she said it, with that careless smirk, her eyes briefly meeting mine before darting away as if she'd crossed a line she didn't care about. I forced a laugh, trying to ease the tension, but inside, something cracked open quietly. It was my best friend Jacob's birthday dinner. The table was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of easy banter couples usually share. I had planned the night for Emily's sake. She'd been stressed from work, distant for weeks. I thought an evening out might help us reconnect. But as she leaned closer to Jacob's girlfriend, whispering something that made them both giggle while I sat in silence, I realized I was no longer part of her world. For months, she had been colder. The touches were mechanical. The affection rationed. And every time I asked if something was wrong, she'd roll her eyes and say, "You're overthinking again, Ryan." But that night, under the warm glow of the restaurant lights, her words, "Marrying you was a mistake," didn't sound like a joke. They sounded like the truth she'd been wanting to say for a long time. I smiled through it, even raised my glass to make a toast. "To mistakes that make us stronger," I said, earning a few nervous laughs. Emily shot me a quick glance, maybe expecting me to be hurt, maybe disappointed that I wasn't reacting enough. I'd learned long ago that she fed on reactions. Silence, though, that unsettled her. Later in the car she laughed and said, "Oh, come on, Ryan. You know I didn't mean it." I looked out the window, watching the streetlights blur past. "Sure," I said. "Just another joke, right?" She sighed dramatically. "You really need to lighten up. It's like I can't say anything around you anymore." I didn't respond, because deep down, I knew what was coming. Every relationship has a breaking point, and hers was wrapped in sarcasm, hidden in laughter, waiting for me to finally stop pretending it didn't hurt. That night, as we lay in bed, her back turned to me. I stared at the ceiling and made a silent promise. If she ever wanted out, I'd give it to her, completely. The following days carried an odd quiet between us, like the kind that fills a house after a storm. Emily behaved as if nothing had happened, humming around the kitchen, scrolling her phone at breakfast, pretending that dinner night joke had evaporated. But I couldn't shake the echo of her words. "Marrying you was a mistake." It played in my head like a broken record, each repetition dulling something inside me that I once thought was unbreakable. I began noticing small things. The way she flinched when I touched her shoulder. How her smile seemed reserved for others but never for me. How she suddenly started going out with her co-workers more often. One night, when she said she was meeting a friend for drinks, I simply nodded and said, "All right, have fun." No questions, no suspicion, just distance. That's when I saw her hesitate. Maybe she wasn't used to me not caring. The truth was I cared too much for too long. I'd spent years trying to be the kind of husband who made her feel loved, respected, safe. But with Emily, it always felt like chasing a ghost. Nothing was ever enough. Too quiet, too boring, too predictable. Those were her favorite words. And I believed her once, thinking if I changed, she'd see me again. But change didn't bring her closer. It only made her drift further away. A week later, I came home early from work. Her car was parked in the driveway. I walked in and heard faint laughter coming from the living room. I expected to see her watching TV, but she wasn't alone. Sitting opposite her on the couch was a man I didn't recognize, his hand resting just a little too comfortably on the backrest behind her. Their laughter stopped the moment I stepped in. "Oh, Ryan, you're home early," she said, her voice shaky but defensive. The man stood up, pretending to be casual. "Hey, I'm Mark from her office." I nodded slowly. "Office meeting at home now?" Emily crossed her arms. "Don't start. We were just discussing a project." "Right," I said, glancing at the untouched coffee cups. "You always discuss projects with dim lights and wine." She rolled her eyes. "You're being paranoid." I wanted to yell, to demand the truth, but instead, I smiled, the same way she had that night at dinner. "No worries," I said calmly. "I'm sure it's just another joke, right?" That silence between us returned, But this time, it felt heavier, like both of us knew something had ended. That night, I didn't sleep beside her. I packed a bag and went to stay at my brother's. Not because I was angry, but because something inside me finally went quiet. The part of me that begged for her love was gone. 3 days later, Emily called me. Her voice was softer than usual, like someone rehearsing guilt. "Ryan, can we talk?" she asked. I could have ignored her, but curiosity, or maybe closure, made me agree. We met at the same restaurant where her joke had cut me open in front of everyone. I wondered if she realized the irony. She arrived looking different. Hair neatly tied, makeup barely there. She looked tired. For once, she didn't have that defensive wall in her eyes. She sat down and avoided my gaze. "I shouldn't have said that," she began quietly. "That night I was stressed. I didn't mean it like that." I stirred my coffee, waiting. "So how did you mean it?" Her lips trembled slightly. "I don't know. I just feel like we've lost the spark, Ryan. Everything's routine. You don't surprise me anymore. I wanted to feel something, even if it was anger." There it was, the truth behind her cruelty. Not hatred. Not boredom. Just emptiness. She wanted excitement, even if it meant destroying what we had. I leaned back and looked at her for a long time. "You know," I said slowly, "I used to think love was about fighting for each other. But now I realize it's about not making the other person feel like they have to beg to be wanted." Her eyes widened, as if she finally heard me for the first time. "Ryan, I don't want to lose you," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "You already did. You just haven't felt the silence yet." We sat there in heavy quiet. Then she tried to laugh it off, just like before. "You're being dramatic again," she said softly, but her voice cracked. I stood up, placed a few bills on the table, and looked at her one last time. "Remember that night? When you said marrying me was a mistake?" She froze, eyes glistening. I took a deep breath. Well, I couldn't agree more. The room fell silent around us. Even the faint clinking of glasses seemed to stop. Emily's face drained of color as my words hung between us. Sharp, final, honest. I walked out without looking back. There was no anger, no heartbreak, just peace. For the first time in years, I felt weightless, free from the constant ache of trying to be enough. That night, I drove aimlessly until the city lights faded behind me. I stopped near the lake where we used to go in the early days, back when she still held my hand without hesitation. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and I realized something beautiful. Sometimes, letting go isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself for once. And for me, that choice came disguised as a joke.